Captain Marcus Rodriguez adjusted his helmet one final time as the transport helicopter descended toward the landing zone. The rhythmic thrum of rotor blades filled the cramped cabin where 12 elite operatives sat in tense silence. Each member of Strike Team Alpha had been hand-picked for this mission, a precision extraction of a high-value target from a compound deep in hostile territory. The briefing had been straightforward. Get in, secure the package, and extract within 48 hours. No complications, no deviations from protocol. The mission had been months in the planning. Intelligence reports suggested the target, a former military contractor named Victor Blackwood, possessed critical information about weapons trafficking operations that could save countless lives. Blackwood had gone rogue 3 years earlier, disappearing into the shadows after allegedly stealing classified military technology. Now, satellite imagery had pinpointed his location to a fortified compound in the mountains, surrounded by mercenaries and automated defense systems. Rodriguez glanced at his team. Sergeant Lisa Chen, their demolitions expert, methodically checked her equipment for the third time. Staff Sergeant James Morrison, their sniper, cleaned his rifle scope with practiced precision. The others, Thompson, Williams, Davis, and the rest, each focused on their respective roles. They had trained together for 2 years, becoming a seamless unit that operated like clockwork under pressure. The helicopter pilot's voice crackled through their headsets. 2 minutes to drop zone. Weather's holding steady, minimal wind. Rodriguez acknowledged and gave his team the signal. They began their final equipment checks, securing weapons and communication gear. The mission parameters were clear. Establish a perimeter, breach the compound, locate Blackwood, and extract him alive. Intelligence suggested minimal resistance, but Rodriguez had learned never to trust intelligence completely. As the aircraft approached the designated coordinates, Rodriguez reviewed the tactical layout one more time. The compound sat on a ridge overlooking a valley, with 3 main access routes. Alpha Team would approach from the north, using the cover of dense forest to mask their advance. Bravo Command, their air support and coordination unit, would maintain overwatch from a secure position 15 miles away, providing real-time intelligence and emergency extraction if needed. The helicopter touched down in a clearing surrounded by towering pines. Within seconds, the team had disembarked and taken defensive positions while the aircraft lifted off, disappearing into the pre-dawn darkness. Rodriguez checked his watch. 300 hours. They had 6 hours of darkness to complete their approach and establish position before the assault began. The forest was eerily quiet as they moved through the undergrowth, each step calculated and silent. Rodriguez's night vision showed the terrain ahead clearly: rocky outcroppings, fallen logs, and dense vegetation that would provide excellent cover. The team moved in a diamond formation, with Morrison taking point and Chen covering their six. Their destination lay 3 kilometers ahead, where intelligence suggested Blackwood was being held in the compound's main building. Rodriguez felt the familiar mixture of anticipation and focus that came before every mission. This operation could be career-defining, potentially exposing a network that had been operating in the shadows for years. The team pressed forward through the darkness, unaware that their carefully planned mission was about to become something far more dangerous than any of them had imagined. The first sign of trouble came when Morrison's voice whispered through their comms. Movement ahead. Multiple contacts. Armed patrol. Rodriguez signaled for the team to take cover behind a cluster of boulders. Through his scope, he could see 3 figures moving along a game trail, their weapons clearly visible in the green glow of night vision. This wasn't supposed to happen. Intelligence had indicated minimal external security. Rodriguez made a quick decision. They would wait for the patrol to pass, then continue their approach. The mission was too important to abort over a single, unexpected patrol. He signaled to his team, and they settled into position, weapons trained on the approaching figures. The patrol passed within 20 meters of their position, completely unaware of the elite soldiers hidden in the shadows. As the patrol disappeared into the forest, Rodriguez felt a nagging doubt. Intelligence failures were dangerous, often fatal, but they had come too far to turn back now. He gave the signal to move out, and Strike Team Alpha continued their advance toward the compound, each step taking them deeper into what would soon become a deadly trap. The compound appeared exactly as the satellite images had shown, a cluster of buildings surrounded by a high concrete wall topped with razor wire. Floodlights swept the perimeter at regular intervals, and Rodriguez could make out guard towers at each corner. The main building, a 3-story structure in the center, was where Blackwood was supposedly being held. Everything looked routine, exactly as planned. Rodriguez positioned his team along the northern ridge, giving them a clear view of the compound below. Morrison set up his sniper position with a clear line of sight to the guard towers. Chen prepared her breaching charges for the main gate. The others took their assigned positions, creating overlapping fields of fire that would allow them to control the entire approach. At 600 hours, Rodriguez gave the signal to begin. Morrison's first shot eliminated the guard in the north tower, a clean headshot that dropped the target instantly. Chen's explosive charge blew the main gate, and the team moved forward in perfect synchronization. Within minutes, they had breached the compound's outer defenses and were advancing toward the main building. The resistance was lighter than expected. A few guards appeared at windows and doorways, but they were quickly neutralized by the team's superior training and equipment. Rodriguez began to feel confident that the mission was proceeding according to plan. They reached the main building's entrance, where Chen placed another charge on the reinforced door. The explosion echoed through the compound, and Strike Team Alpha poured through the breach. The interior was dimly lit, with long corridors leading to what appeared to be holding cells. Rodriguez split his team into two groups, one to secure the building, the other to locate Blackwood. Time was critical now. They needed to find their target and extract before enemy reinforcements arrived. Morrison's voice came through the comm. "Captain, I've got movement on the eastern approach. Looks like vehicles, maybe 6 or 7. Rodriguez acknowledged and pressed forward. They found Blackwood in a cell on the second floor, exactly where intelligence had predicted. The man looked older than his photos, with graying hair and a thin build, but his eyes were alert and intelligent. "Victor Blackwood?" Rodriguez asked, though he already knew the answer. The man nodded, and Rodriguez quickly explained the situation. "We're here to extract you. Intelligence suggests you have information vital to national security." Blackwood stood without hesitation, and Rodriguez began leading him toward the exit. That's when everything went wrong. As they reached the main floor, explosions erupted around the compound. Morrison's voice crackled through the comm. "Multiple contacts, heavily armed. This isn't a rescue, it's an ambush." Rodriguez realized with growing horror that they had walked into a trap. The intelligence had been compromised, and someone had fed them false information. The team took defensive positions as enemy fire erupted from multiple directions. Rodriguez counted at least 20 hostile contacts, all armed with military-grade weapons. This wasn't the minimal resistance they had been told to expect. Someone had known they were coming and had prepared accordingly. Chen's voice cut through the chaos. "Captain, we need to move. They're surrounding the building." Rodriguez grabbed Blackwood and began moving toward the rear exit, but gunfire forced them back. They were trapped inside the compound with no clear escape route. The mission had become a fight for survival. Rodriguez activated his emergency beacon, calling for immediate extraction. Bravo Command's response was immediate. "Alpha Team, we're tracking your position. Extraction helicopter is en route, ETA 15 minutes." 15 minutes felt like an eternity under heavy fire, but Rodriguez knew they had to hold their position until help arrived. The team consolidated their position in the main building's central corridor, using overturned furniture and concrete pillars for cover. Morrison had found a position on the second floor where he could provide covering fire, while Chen worked to create additional exit routes using her remaining explosives. The situation was desperate, but not hopeless. Rodriguez looked at Blackwood, who seemed surprisingly calm despite the chaos around them. "What did you take?" Rodriguez asked. "What information is worth all this?" Blackwood smiled grimly. "I didn't take anything, Captain. I discovered something that certain people would kill to keep secret. The weapons trafficking operation you're investigating. It goes much higher than you think." The implications hit Rodriguez like a physical blow. If Blackwood was right, then this mission wasn't just compromised. It was a setup from the beginning. Someone with access to classified information had deliberately sent them into a trap. The question was why, and more importantly, who. Enemy fire intensified as Rodriguez processed this information. The attackers were using military tactics and equipment, suggesting they weren't just mercenaries but trained soldiers. Rodriguez began to suspect that this operation involved more than just weapons trafficking. The stakes were higher than anyone had realized. Morrison's voice interrupted his thoughts. "Captain, I've got eyes on the extraction helicopter. 2 minutes out." Rodriguez felt a surge of relief, but it was short-lived. The sound of approaching aircraft was accompanied by something else, the distinctive whine of surface-to-air missiles being launched. The extraction helicopter exploded in a brilliant fireball, its wreckage raining down on the compound. Rodriguez watched in horror as their lifeline disappeared in seconds. They were now completely cut off, surrounded by hostile forces with no way out. The mission had become a desperate fight for survival against an enemy that seemed to know their every move. Chen's voice cut through the despair. "Captain, I found something. Hidden tunnel system beneath the building. Looks like it leads to the valley below." Rodriguez made a quick decision. They would use the tunnels to escape, but first they needed to ensure Blackwood's safety. The information he possessed might be the key to exposing whoever had set them up. The team began moving toward the basement, fighting their way through increasingly intense enemy fire. Rodriguez could hear vehicles approaching from multiple directions, and he knew they had only minutes before the building was completely surrounded. The tunnel system was their only hope of escape. As they descended into the basement, Rodriguez's radio crackled with an unexpected transmission. It was a voice he didn't recognize, speaking in heavily accented English. "Captain Rodriguez, you and your team are surrounded. Surrender now and we will ensure your safety. Continue to resist, and we will be forced to take more aggressive action." Rodriguez ignored the transmission and focused on the tunnel entrance Chen had discovered. The passage was narrow and appeared to extend several hundred meters into the mountainside. It was their only option. He ordered his team to enter the tunnel while he and Morrison provided covering fire from the basement entrance. The tunnel was dark and cramped, forcing them to move in single file. Rodriguez brought up the rear, constantly checking for pursuit. The sound of explosions echoed through the passage as enemy forces began systematically destroying the building above them. Rodriguez realized they were trying to collapse the tunnel system, trapping them underground. After what felt like hours but was probably only 30 minutes, they reached the tunnel's end, a concealed exit in the valley below. Rodriguez emerged first, scanning the area for threats. The forest was quiet, but he knew their enemies would soon discover the tunnel system and begin searching the valley. Morrison pointed to a ridge line several kilometers away. "There's a communications tower up there. If we can reach it, we might be able to call for backup." Rodriguez nodded, knowing it was their best option. They began moving through the forest, using the terrain to mask their movement while constantly watching for pursuit. Blackwood had remained silent during their escape, but now he spoke quietly to Rodriguez. "Captain, there's something you need to know. The operation you're investigating, it's not just about weapons trafficking. There are people in your own government who are involved, people with the authority to order missions like this." Rodriguez felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. If Blackwood was right, then their mission had been compromised from the beginning. Someone with access to classified information had deliberately sent them into a trap, knowing they would likely be killed. The question was who, and how high up the conspiracy went. As they approached the communications tower, Rodriguez spotted movement in the tree line below. Enemy forces were systematically searching the valley, using military tactics and equipment. They were clearly professionals, not the mercenaries that intelligence had suggested. Rodriguez realized they were facing a much more dangerous enemy than anyone had anticipated. Chen established a defensive perimeter around the base of the communications tower, while Morrison climbed to the top to establish contact with any friendly forces in the area. Rodriguez stayed close to Blackwood, knowing the man's information might be the key to exposing the conspiracy that had nearly gotten them all killed. Morrison's voice came through the radio. "Captain, I've got contact with a military base about 50 kilometers north. They're sending a rescue team, but it'll take at least 2 hours to reach us." Rodriguez acknowledged, knowing they would have to hold their position until help arrived. The tower offered good defensive positions, but they were outnumbered and low on ammunition. As enemy forces began surrounding the tower, Rodriguez made a decision that would change everything. He activated his emergency beacon, broadcasting on all frequencies. "This is Captain Marcus Rodriguez, Strike Team Alpha. We are under attack by hostile forces. Mission was compromised from the beginning, requesting immediate assistance from any friendly units in the area." The response was immediate and unexpected. A voice Rodriguez recognized as Colonel Harrison, his commanding officer, came through the radio. "Captain Rodriguez, cease all transmissions immediately. You are ordered to surrender to local authorities. This is a direct order." Rodriguez stared at the radio in disbelief. His own commander was ordering him to surrender to the enemy. Rodriguez looked at his team, seeing the same shock and confusion in their eyes. Morrison shook his head slowly. "Captain, something's not right here. The colonel's voice. It doesn't sound right." Rodriguez listened to the transmission again and realized Morrison was correct. The voice was similar to Colonel Harrison's, but there were subtle differences in tone and cadence. Chen's voice interrupted his thoughts. "Captain, we've got company. Multiple vehicles approaching from the south." Rodriguez could see dust clouds rising from the valley below as enemy forces moved to surround their position. They had perhaps 15 minutes before the tower was completely surrounded. Rodriguez made a decision that would define the rest of his career. He turned to Blackwood and said, "Tell me everything. What information do you have, and who's trying to kill us for it?" Blackwood nodded and began speaking rapidly, his words painting a picture of corruption and conspiracy that reached the highest levels of government. According to Blackwood, the weapons trafficking operation was just the surface of a much larger conspiracy. Military contracts worth billions of dollars were being manipulated by a network of defense contractors, military officers, and government officials. The stolen technology wasn't just weapons. It was advanced surveillance and communication systems that could be used to monitor and control civilian populations. "They're not just selling weapons," Blackwood explained. "They're selling the ability to control entire populations. The technology I discovered can monitor phone calls, internet traffic, even private conversations in people's homes. It's being sold to the highest bidder, regardless of their intentions." Rodriguez felt the full weight of the situation settling on his shoulders. They weren't just fighting for their lives. They were fighting to expose a conspiracy that threatened the very foundations of democracy. The people who had sent them on this mission weren't trying to stop the weapons trafficking. They were trying to eliminate the one person who could expose their involvement. As enemy forces closed in on the tower, Rodriguez made a final transmission. "This is Captain Marcus Rodriguez. We are American soldiers under attack by hostile forces. We have evidence of a conspiracy involving high-ranking military and government officials. If anything happens to us, investigate the people who ordered this mission." The transmission was cut short as the first explosions erupted around the base of the tower. Rodriguez and his team took defensive positions as enemy forces began their final assault. The battle for the truth was about to begin, and Rodriguez knew that everything depended on their ability to survive the next few hours. Morrison's sniper rifle cracked repeatedly as he engaged targets approaching from multiple directions. Chen's remaining explosives created defensive barriers that channeled enemy forces into killing zones. The rest of the team established overlapping fields of fire that turned the tower into a fortress. But Rodriguez could see they were vastly outnumbered. Enemy forces were using military-grade equipment and tactics, confirming his suspicion that this was a professional operation. Someone with significant resources and authority was trying to eliminate them, and they were willing to use any means necessary. As the battle raged, Rodriguez noticed something that made his blood run cold. Among the enemy forces, he recognized several faces, soldiers he had served with, men he had trusted with his life. They were wearing different uniforms now, but he knew them. His own government was using American soldiers to eliminate his team. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The conspiracy wasn't just about weapons trafficking or surveillance technology. It was about eliminating anyone who could expose the truth. Rodriguez and his team had become targets not because they were enemies of the state, but because they were threats to people who had betrayed their oath to protect and defend the Constitution. Rodriguez activated his radio one final time. "This is Captain Marcus Rodriguez. We are under attack by American soldiers. The conspiracy involves our own military. Victor Blackwood has evidence that must be protected at all costs. Someone needs to investigate." The transmission was cut off as an explosion rocked the tower. As enemy forces closed in, Rodriguez made one final decision. He handed Blackwood a small device, an encrypted data recorder that contained everything they had discussed. "Get this to someone you trust," he said. "Make sure the truth gets out." Blackwood nodded and disappeared into the forest, using a route Chen had identified earlier. The final battle was fierce but brief. Rodriguez and his team fought with the desperate courage of men who knew they were fighting for something bigger than themselves. Morrison's sniper rifle fell silent first, followed by Chen's explosives. One by one, the members of Strike Team Alpha were overwhelmed by superior numbers and firepower. When the smoke cleared, Rodriguez lay wounded but alive among the wreckage of the communications tower. Enemy forces surrounded him, their weapons trained on his position. A figure emerged from the group, a man Rodriguez recognized as General Marcus Thompson, one of the Pentagon's most respected officers. "Captain Rodriguez," Thompson said, his voice filled with what sounded like genuine regret. "You've caused us a great deal of trouble. The operation you stumbled into is classified at the highest levels. What you've seen here today never happened." Rodriguez struggled to his feet, blood streaming from multiple wounds. "You're a traitor," he said, his voice hoarse but defiant. "You swore an oath to protect this country, and you've broken it for money." Thompson's expression didn't change, but Rodriguez could see something flicker in his eyes, perhaps guilt, perhaps fear. "The world is more complicated than you understand, Captain," Thompson replied. "Sometimes sacrifices must be made for the greater good. Your team was expendable. The operation you were investigating is vital to national security." Rodriguez laughed bitterly. "National security? You're selling surveillance technology to foreign governments. You're the threat to national security." Thompson signaled to his men, and Rodriguez felt the cold barrel of a rifle pressed against his head. "You have a choice, Captain. You can disappear quietly, with full honors and a generous pension for your family, or you can continue to be a problem, in which case your family will suffer the consequences." Rodriguez closed his eyes, thinking of his wife and two young children back home. He had sworn to protect them, but he had also sworn to protect his country. The two oaths were now in direct conflict. He opened his eyes and looked directly at Thompson. "I choose to do what's right." The general nodded sadly. "I expected as much. You always were too honorable for your own good." He turned to his men. "Make it look like an accident, equipment malfunction during a training exercise. The usual story." Rodriguez felt a moment of pride, knowing that at least Blackwood had escaped with the evidence. As the soldiers prepared to eliminate the last witness to their conspiracy, Rodriguez heard the distinctive sound of rotors approaching. A helicopter appeared over the ridge, its spotlight illuminating the scene below. But this wasn't a rescue. It was General Thompson's extraction team, coming to clean up the mess. Rodriguez watched as the helicopter settled onto the ground near the destroyed communications tower. Several men in civilian clothes emerged, carrying what appeared to be recording equipment. They were going to stage the scene, making it appear that Strike Team Alpha had been killed in a legitimate military operation. But as the civilians began setting up their equipment, Rodriguez heard something that made his heart race. Another helicopter, approaching from the north. This one was different, flying low and fast in a tactical approach pattern. Thompson heard it too, his expression changing from confident to concerned. The second helicopter appeared over the ridge, and Rodriguez could see military markings on its hull. A voice boomed from a loudspeaker. "This is Colonel Sarah Mitchell, military police. You are ordered to cease all operations and surrender immediately. This area is under military investigation." Thompson's men looked to their commander for orders, but the general seemed frozen with indecision. Rodriguez realized that someone had received his final transmission and had sent help. The conspiracy was being exposed, and Thompson's carefully planned cover-up was falling apart. As military police officers fast-roped from the helicopter, Thompson drew his sidearm and pointed it at Rodriguez. "You should have taken the deal, Captain," he said, his voice filled with rage. "Now everyone dies." But before he could pull the trigger, Morrison's voice crackled through Rodriguez's radio. Somehow, the sniper had survived. "Captain, I've got a clear shot. Give me the word." Rodriguez looked at Thompson, seeing the desperation in the general's eyes. "Take it," he said quietly. Morrison's rifle cracked once, and Thompson fell forward, his weapon clattering across the ground. As military police officers secured the scene, Rodriguez felt a mixture of relief and exhaustion. The conspiracy had been exposed, but at a terrible cost. Most of his team was dead, and the truth about the weapons trafficking operation would now come to light. But the fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. Colonel Mitchell approached Rodriguez as medics worked to treat his wounds. "Captain, we received your transmission. The FBI is already moving to arrest the other conspirators. Victor Blackwood is in protective custody, and his evidence is being analyzed by a special prosecutor." Rodriguez nodded, knowing that justice would finally be served. As the helicopter lifted off, carrying Rodriguez to safety, he looked down at the battlefield where his team had made their final stand. They had died fighting for the truth, and their sacrifice had not been in vain. The conspiracy would be exposed, the guilty would be punished, and the American people would know that their military had been infiltrated by traitors. But Rodriguez also knew that this was just one battle in a larger war. Corruption and conspiracy would always exist, threatening the very foundations of democracy. It would be up to people like him, soldiers who honored their oath above all else, to stand guard against those who would betray their country for personal gain. 6 months later, Rodriguez testified before a congressional committee investigating the weapons trafficking conspiracy. His testimony, combined with Blackwood's evidence, led to the arrest and conviction of dozens of military officers, defense contractors, and government officials. The scandal became known as Operation Blackout, and it resulted in the largest military corruption investigation in American history. Rodriguez was awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions, but he took no satisfaction in the recognition. Too many good soldiers had died because of the conspiracy, and their families would never see justice for their loss. The medal was a reminder of the price of freedom and the constant vigilance required to protect it. As he stood before the committee, Rodriguez thought about the members of Strike Team Alpha who had died fighting for the truth. Morrison, Chen, and the others had given their lives to expose the conspiracy, and their sacrifice had saved countless others from the weapons and surveillance technology that would have been sold to America's enemies. The investigation revealed that the conspiracy had been operating for over a decade, selling advanced military technology to foreign governments and private organizations. The surveillance systems alone could have been used to monitor and control entire populations, threatening democracy around the world. The weapons trafficking was just the beginning of a much larger plan to destabilize governments and profit from the resulting chaos. Rodriguez's final words to the committee were simple but powerful. The members of Strike Team Alpha died protecting the Constitution and the American people. Their sacrifice reminds us that freedom is not free, and that each generation must be willing to pay the price to preserve it for the next. As Rodriguez walked out of the hearing room, he knew that his military career was over. The conspiracy had been exposed, but the scars would remain forever. He had seen too much, lost too many friends, and learned too many painful truths about the people he had trusted to lead him. But he also knew that he had done his duty. The oath he had taken as a young officer to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, had been fulfilled. The domestic enemies had been exposed and defeated, and the American people were safer because of the sacrifice made by Strike Team Alpha. Rodriguez returned to his family, carrying the weight of what he had experienced, but also the knowledge that he had served with honor. The conspiracy had been defeated, but the vigilance required to protect democracy would continue. And somewhere, other soldiers were taking the oath, preparing to stand guard against those who would betray their country for personal gain. The story of Strike Team Alpha became legendary within military circles, a reminder that sometimes the greatest threats come from within. The death crest that one pilot had spotted from Bravo Command, the symbol of the conspiracy, had been exposed and defeated by soldiers who valued their oath above their lives. In the end, Rodriguez realized that this was what military service was truly about. Not just fighting foreign enemies, but protecting the very principles that made America worth defending. The price was high, but the alternative, allowing corruption and conspiracy to flourish, was unacceptable. As he watched his children play in their backyard, Rodriguez felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in years. The conspiracy had been defeated, justice had been served, and the American people were safer because of the sacrifice made by Strike Team Alpha. The mission had been completed, and the truth had finally been revealed.